Welcome in. We're talking Presbyterian college basketball. The Blue Hose getting ready for another season in the Big South. Let's start out on the men's side. Quinton Ferrell, who's been back at his alma mater now for, what is this, year number 7 for you, Coach, guiding the Blue Hose?
That's correct. That's correct, Pete. Yep, year number 7.
Wow, that is impressive indeed. A point guard for Greg Nybert in the D2 era, and then an assistant under the great former head coach of the Blue Hose, some time at the College of Charleston, and then a return when Dustin Kearns moved on to Appalachian State. First off, you know, they say catchers make great managers in baseball, and that's been evident over the fact. How much do you think playing point guard helped you in coaching, especially once you became a head coach?
Yeah, I definitely think it helped a ton. Obviously, you know, you always hear growing up, you know, you're an extension of the head coach. Obviously, you have a lot of leadership, you know, opportunities as a point guard, and, you know, it's expected of you to lead. And so I think it's definitely great training. You know, if you come up as a point guard, it just prepares you. You're used to, you know, getting familiar with your voice, you know, directing your teammates. You think the game on a different level as a point guard because you're not only responsible for yourself, but, you know, everyone else on the floor at all times. And I think the more you grow with the position, the more you are able to take those things to another level.
What was the adjustment like for you going from being an assistant under Greg, under Earl Grant, to becoming a head coach? What were some of the things, as they say, you know, when you got to call your first time out, that's a real test. But what was that transition like, now taking on the whole organization?
Yeah, just one of those things, you know, no matter how much you prepare to become a head coach one day, you know, it's just like, you know, being a father or being a husband. You know, everybody always tells you once you know, assume those positions, that's when you really see what it's about. And so I tried my best. I had great mentors coming up when I was an assistant coach to prepare myself as much as I could. But, you know, once you get in the seat, you just learn so much. You know, it makes you feel like, man, like your task as an assistant, they're minimal compared to just the amount of time and energy you put out every day to all aspects of a program when you're the head coach. And so I had a mentor of mine, Shaka Smart, I always used to say, every coach should have to be a head coach before they're an assistant coach. So that saying definitely, you know, took on a different meaning once I became a head coach and really understood what he meant, you know, by saying that to me years ago.
What are some of the core philosophies? Again, Greg Nybert, who folks may not be familiar with, had a 3-decade run at PC, was very good on the D2 level, and then saw the transition to Division I. You were part of that as well. And, you know, as a Division I program, PC over the years has gotten wins against Wake Forest, Auburn, Cincinnati, to name a few. I would think his whole thing was based on playing really good defense, being efficient. How much of what you did as a player for him and an assistant under him are you trying to do as the head coach of the Blue Hose?
Yeah, I just think, you know, so much of who Coach Nybert was is embedded in me. Obviously, I met him when I was 17 and went on to play for him for 4 seasons and be his assistant for 5. And, you know, there's so many great things that I could say about Coach, especially looking back, you know, having almost been in the business for 20 years as a coach. You know, there were times when you're a student athlete, you know, you might not always understood his method or the reasons why, but definitely having made a career of this, you know, I'm more appreciative of the level of coach that I was playing under and that I got to start my coaching career with. I think one of the coach's greatest attributes that I learned just as a player even, and then obviously my 5 years as an assistant, is just the level of preparation, the amount of work it takes, the detail, and leaving no stone unturned. And I think that was one of the things that allowed me to excel in the profession when I finally left him. You know, I was extremely prepared. You know, anybody that I went and worked for, there was nothing that I wasn't ready for. And so I just think just the overall part of, you know, having a tremendous work ethic, but just the preparation and detail that it goes in to do every aspect of being a coach, whether it's scouting, whether it's recruiting, whether it's player development, whether it's relationship building, you know, all those things, just, you know, the level of detail and preparation is something that he definitely gave me a foundation of.
So between your stop as an assistant at Presbyterian and eventually landing at the College of Charleston with Earl Grant, you were at a couple of military schools, first at the Citadel and then at Army. So, and the Citadel, very clearly over the years has been able to take in grad transfers and add them in, unlike a VMI. I'm not sure they were doing that to that extent when you were there about a decade and a half ago, but what was it like working at military schools, and how might that have influenced how you coach players and some of the techniques you apply now?
Well, first off, I think, both of my experiences at Citadel and West Point, I got to work for two tremendous head coaches. When I left PC and went to the Citadel, Chuck Drizel was the head coach there, whose dad is a basketball Hall of Famer, college basketball Hall of Famer, Lefty Drizel, and so that was an invaluable experience just because it was my first time not being underneath Coach Nybert as a player and as an assistant coach, and so just some of his philosophy and some of the things I picked up from him definitely I added to my toolbox, so to speak, as a coach. And even back then, we actually did have a grad transfer. Lynn Elmore's son, Stephen Elmore, he ended up, because of that Maryland relationship, he ended up being a player that was on our team that year. And so got a glimpse of that, kind of what people do now, more so with taking grad transfers. Very popular now. It wasn't as popular back then, but experienced that there. And then my time at West Point, obviously with Zach Spiker, who's not a head coach at Drexel, who's been at Drexel probably going on close to a decade. Tremendous coach on our staff there. I worked with three other guys that were the other assistants. All three of those guys are head coaches now, so just the level of, elite talent on the coaching staff being at West Point, the guys I work with every single day. I think both institutions, though, what you got to see again, the same characteristics that allow any program to be elite. You had that in a lot of parts because of the type of young men that you were recruiting at those institutions. And then even on the faculty side of those places, it kind of just trickled down. And so I think just, being in an environment where discipline, you could kind of take it for granted, but at those places, you see it on a daily basis at an elite level. And there's no secret why a lot of those young men and the people that work at those institutions, by large parts, they're very successful people in life. And so, just a lot of different characteristics and things that you could use to shape yourself if you were paying attention. And so, I was always told, whatever campus you're on as an assistant coach, there's something there that you can take and be better and help you as a coach. And so I really tried to dive into that when I was at those places, even though I was only at each stop for a year, gained a lot of experience from both places, though.
So you're a guy from North Augusta in South Carolina. You played your college ball in the state, had coached in the state. How did you get from Charleston at the Citadel job up to West Point? What was the connection that got you up there?
Yeah, that's a great question. A funny story really quickly. My wife, when she graduated college from the University of Georgia, she actually moved to New York and lived there for 3 years. And at the time we were dating, and I was an assistant at PC at the time. And she used to always say, because we were doing long distance, I need to get a coaching job in New York. And I'm like, never. Because like you mentioned, all of my time I had spent in South Carolina.
Yeah.
And then we get engaged, and she moves down to South Carolina. I go to the Citadel, and then after 1 year, I get the job at West Point, and so now we're moving to New York. Our first year being married.
Yeah.
But the business, the industry is small, and so Barkley Radebaugh, who's the head coach at Charleston Southern at the time, I didn't know this at the time. Him and Zach Spiker had a relationship because Zach was a graduate assistant on Greg Marshall's staff at Winthrop when Barkley was an assistant for Greg at Winthrop. And Zach had an opening, and I guess, Barkley mentored him, and they had a relationship. And, Barkley had met me over the years on the road. Barkley spent some time at PC, so he knew of me a little bit more than I even probably knew of him. And, we would talk those some on the road in recruiting. And I think those conversations he had with me allowed him, when Zach had the opening, to be like, oh, Quinton Ferrell, I know the perfect guy for you. If I were you, I would have hired him yesterday. And so Barkley gave me a very strong recommendation to Zach. And then that process started, phone interview, and then they flew me to campus, and, the rest is history. So got to thank Barkley for connecting the dots, for that opportunity.
It's amazing how, again, having contacts and just getting your name out there and knowing people really does help. You mentioned the other assistants who were part of that Army staff. Who were those guys that are now head coaches?
Well, so Jimmy Allen was the top assistant at the time, and he ended up getting the West Point job when Zach left and went to Drexel. So Jimmy was the head coach at West Point, maybe about 6 seasons or so. And I think he's the head coach right now. I forget which institution, maybe Averett, I think maybe in Virginia. And then Kevin App is the head coach at Williams, big time D3 powerhouse up in
Yeah.
Massachusetts. And then Sean Rutigliano, who was at Belmont last season as an assistant coach, he just took the Colby College D3 head job in
Up in
Maine.
Maine. Yeah.
Yeah, up in Maine. And so this is his first season as a head coach. So we're just surrounded by, on that staff, myself and those three guys. We had I feel like a high level staff and had a really good season at that time in the history of Army basketball. So.
Yeah. Well, you have the distinction, by the way, of having worked at two of the three schools that were in Division I at the time the NCAA tournament was created, 1939, that have yet to get there. I know you tried your best, but William and Mary is the other one.
Yeah.
So anyway, I just get a kick out of that stat. I always remind my friends of the Citadel about that. By the way, the Rutigliano last name, I know he's in basketball. Is he any relation to Sam Rutigliano, the former coach of the Cleveland Browns, Liberty football?
I'm not sure, but I'll have to ask him that. I'll have to ask him how you bring it up.
I just wondered, you never know, different sport. Well, Quinton, one of the things I really like about you is you still are one of the few coaches that wears a coat and tie courtside. I'm very impressed by that. What's the motivation behind that?
I think sometimes people, kind of follow the latest trend. And, when I came up, that was the way that we did it. I actually kind of enjoy that side of it, because it kind of, for me, it ties back to part of the reason why I coach, again, just being a mentor and trying to continue to help my guys in all facets of their life, on and off the court. And so it's just something that I didn't feel the need to kind of follow the newest trend. And I think it's something we'll continue to do here at PC for sure.
Well, that's really great. And again, I know you've built a foundation there. You've had talented players. You're dealing with what every coach really in America, not only mid-major, but in the power conferences as well, is that a lot of times you get a guy and you may only have him for a year, but continued success to you with the Blue Hose program. And I know that you're fighting the battle each and every year of roster management. And I know that's not the easiest thing in the world.
Yeah, for sure. I've kind of just, my mindset is just to embrace it. You know what I mean? It's a compliment to the program, obviously, if we're developing young men. And, I think, there's times where you'll lose guys. I think we'll have a run or a time or two where we keep a guy. And we actually had that this season with a guy like Jonah Pierce, who's on my roster, who could have went to the portal. He's a preseason all-conference, Big South player, a center, a 6'9" guy. And so, I think you'll win some, you'll lose some. But, I think at the end of the day, I always feel like there's a path to success everywhere you're at. Some places maybe you can do it a little bit quicker. Other places you might have to be in for the long haul and it might take a little bit longer. And so we're just going to take it one day at a time and continue to fight the good fight. And we'll crack the code eventually here at PC.
I know you will. Well, you've got a great foundation and you've had some good wins already during your time there. Best of luck to you. Thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Pete. Really enjoyed it.
Quinton Ferrell, the men's head coach at PC. When we come back, we're going to visit with the women's head coach of the Blue Hose as we continue after this. Welcome back. We are talking PC Blue Hose basketball. We visited with the men's coach, Quinton Ferrell. Now let's talk with Tiffany Sardin, the women's coach, getting ready here in the early stages of year number 2 at the helm. What an interesting basketball journey you've been on. You've been in coaching, I guess, for about a decade now. You played professionally after your days as a fine forward at the University of Virginia under the great Deb Ryan. And then you went and played overseas, I guess Portugal, primary stop there. But 7 different schools. So you have you've made the trek. You've seen a lot of places. Coming to PC got you back to the upstate because you spent some time as an assistant at Clemson. But this basketball journey of yours is so interesting. And on your bio as a player of Virginia, you said you either want to be a physical therapist or a pro basketball player. Well, you did the pro basketball player part. I guess the PT part of it didn't work out, but what led you to the pathway to get into coaching?
Yeah, you know what? Goodness, first, thank you for having me on here. But the coaches, I was fortunate to have some really cool and great coaches. Are you there?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I was fortunate to have some really cool coaches growing up, starting with my AAU coach, my high school coach, and then my college coach, right? I was around some really inspiring women who, I got to experience them firsthand in their leadership and how they were doing things and how they helped so many of my people like myself and my teammates. It was just like, man, I want to do what they're doing. So that's kind of what really inspired me to, I guess, be in this position I'm in now, because I do have a passion and just love helping young women just continue to grow and figure out things through basketball. So, but the coaches I've been fortunate to be around and be under have certainly paved the way and gave me hope that I can do this as well. So here I am.
Native of Chicago. I would think University of Illinois might have been in on you and some of the Big Ten schools. What led you to Virginia? Was it the fact you were going to go play for a Hall of Fame coach? Was that a big part of it?
Yeah. No, U of I was certainly on the radar, but Virginia, like I watched Don Staley, I watched those players. They had a player there, Sky LaRue, and actually one of my AAU teammates had went there as well. So I was following them the moment, pretty more in depth when she went there, and was just like, man, Virginia is such a cool school. And then Coach Ryan and the connection and the relationship that I built with those coaches that was there on staff led me to say, you know what, I think I'm ready to go away from home and, go into this space, but also just some of the great players who were in the program before I got there, but also who was still there when I got there was, it helped make things a lot easier and made me say yes to wanting to go and be at UVA.
And I mentioned you growing up in Chicago, you were coming up at a time when the Bulls were having their dynasty. You wore Scottie Pippen's number. You were a forward. He was a forward. How much did that influence you? Because I would think that had to have some kind of impact on your basketball growth.
Oh, absolutely. Because, you grow up watching, the Chicago Bulls win championships and just be such a successful organization. And, you feel that a place like UVA, they had great success and the coaches that were there and just the players and all that. And Sky LaRue, I keep going back to her, but she was one of the players who I really admired her game coming up. And I always thought like, man, she kind of reminded me a little bit of Scottie Pippen, which is why I was like, wow, I see myself in her game, and we have some similarities and things like that. But the Bulls and UVA, I felt like, wow, that we could connect well, because that program UVA was successful coming into, and just wanted to help keep it going, keep the tradition and the winning ways going once I got there.
And at UVA, I'm guessing you were a leader for a couple of reasons. At the time, you were only the second player there to be a three-time team captain, and that says that you were seen. I guess the other players elected you, maybe the coaches did, but that tells me you were somebody that could be looked up to. And then your last year there, you were the only senior. There were,
Yeah.
like a dozen underclassmen or maybe all freshmen, but how much do you think those shaped you of having to guide what is now your second head coaching stop, of having to guide a team? You were kind of a coach on the court, I would think, for Deb Ryan for a good part of your career.
Yeah, they just had a lot of trust in me, honestly. I'm someone who doesn't shy away from doing things doing the uncomfortable things or saying the most uncomfortable things, but it's just also coming from a place of genuine care and honesty to the people that's around me. So at UVA, my teammates and the coaches saw something in me that, I guess I wasn't thinking about it like that at the time, but, I guess I wanted to do. I'm someone who obviously believes in doing things the right way and at a really high level, and bringing those along with me and trying to get everybody to do the right things as well. So I would say that really played a piece into the leadership role for me. And it's the same thing, you're trying to do right now, just get everybody doing the same things, doing it the right way at a really high level, but, also having genuine care and, supporting each other, right? Through the highs, lows, it doesn't matter, wins or losses, just really being consistent and true to who you are and showing the way how things need to be done, I guess. So.
Before arriving at PC, you were on a staff at St. Louis. You had great success in the Atlantic 10 Conference. Presbyterian has a unique quality to it. And at the mid-major level in the Big South, you're going to recruit a different kind of student athlete than you do some of the other stops you're at. Do you kind of, though, have a template that you like to try to build, hope to build your team around, either half court, up and down, defensive philosophies? What are some of kind of your core principles that you've tried to now establish as a head coach?
Yeah, just honestly, just all out, just hard work, gritty, just want to be able to play up and down. A fast-paced tempo style is what I prefer, but also understanding, having discipline and knowing how to play in the half court as well. But I would say defensive, like it's just to get after, right? I want us to be a super relentless rebounding team, but also a team that's just gonna, the minute you walk in the gym, it's almost like you feel like, God dang it, they defended me right now before the tip-off even happened. But, just hardworking young women who want to learn and keep growing, and just, winners, right? Like you want to be around winners. And I do feel like this environment and the young women we have that.
From a defensive standpoint, are you all about man-to-man, or was zone ever a part of your past?
Yeah, no. So changing it up, like I do like to mix things up. So majority, obviously, man. I prefer man, high pressure man defense. But also, we're not afraid to change it up and go a little bit of zone, do some things that fits the personnel that we have. But again, you'll see a bit of pressure, man to man, full court defense.
You played at Virginia about a decade and a half after the great Dawn Staley was there. Yeah, I once told Dawn that she's probably, she comes from a town that includes Wilt Chamberlain and Kobe Bryant, but I probably put her right up there and with all she did in the game, even before she started winning national titles as a coach. Pro player, Final Four in college, Olympian. But how well have you gotten to know her through the Virginia connection, and is she someone who you can use as a sounding board?
Yeah, she certainly has opened the door for me to reach out to her anytime I need to. I've had a conversation with her over the phone, and obviously took my staff up there. A couple months ago, we went up there. Her whole staff was so welcoming, inviting us in to watch them practice, which was an awesome experience for not just me. We both from the same university, and it just still feels so surreal, even just being in her presence, because she's such a special person, and just watching her be a leader and seeing all the things that she's done for the game it's like, I don't even have the words to say, but it's just so inspiring, right? But it's also like the fact that she did take the time to, to talk with us. So many, that's Dawn Staley. She has so much going on daily, but for her to just take the time and the minute to just even pick up the phone, but also to just be so welcoming to my staff and myself, to coming into their space and learning from them. It's a true testament to just what she's doing now and why she's so successful, and why everybody, is trying to follow the blueprint, right, of what she's putting out there. So,
sure.
But it's been very kind and nice, and I love every bit of it. Yeah. I probably need to take advantage of it a little bit more, but also I know she's busy, and
sure.
I want to be respectful of her time.
Well, it's a Karina Patterson at UNCG, another former Virginia player who's had great success in coaching. You probably got to know her. You worked for Audra Smith, who was, I think, Dawn's roommate at Virginia when they were players. Yeah. So you've utilized the old Cavalier Wahoo pipeline well, I'm sure. And it's interesting. You'll appreciate this story. Of course, the year before you got there, PC gets the stunning Big South tourney title. Gets placed in Columbia to go down there and play. But it was just funny hearing the stories about how the PC players were, after they had their shoot around, they couldn't wait to meet Dawn Staley and some of the South Carolina players. So it's neat, and it's a great relationship to have just an hour down the road. Goals that you can set now to try to get PC back to a Big South title and the championship. What are some of the parameters you've set for yourself in building this as you get ready for year two?
Yeah, just really take it one day at a time, right? Focus pretty heavy on the controllables, right? We know the big picture, obviously, is to win, but just really helping our women stay encouraged, right? And also do things at a really high level, and just finding consistency in the group and just how we doing things and how we want to do things, and just, really sticking with it, right? Like us having a a true foundation and consistency to our approach to how we want to do things, and just making sure all of those around me and in the program are moving in that direction. But I do feel a lot better now in year 2 of just, knowing, getting back acclimated to the lay of the land here in the Big South, and just helping our women and just our program as a whole be better organized to, the task at hand.
Is there in this day of movement, player movement, is that an extra challenge you're finding at PC compared to St. Louis, or is it pretty much the same everywhere?
Yeah, I think it's the same everywhere. But here, obviously, we have our own challenges and unique ways of doing stuff. But it still don't deter me from trying to go after the best players, for sure. And, like in some of that, obviously, through, being a recruiting coach or just to coach at this level in general, you get, some no's, but that doesn't change for me going after trying to get and retain the best women in the program that fit what we're trying to do. So we'll hear no's, but we'll hear yeses, and I'll stay on the trail just like everybody else, trying to get the best players and the best student athletes in the university as a whole.
Well, Coach, best of luck to you. Thanks so much for joining us, and I know you're gonna really have great success there at PC.
Yeah, thank you.